Hello, I'm Brigantia of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Tuesday, and welcome to our latest installment of Pagan Problems. This week we are going to discuss the reason for the season. And it all starts with meme wars, because every year, without fail, on social media, there's just endless memes circulating in which Christians are posting reminders that Jesus is the reason for the season, and then there are retaliatory memes from pagans explaining the origins of Christmas customs that are decidedly pagan and have some words to the effect that heathen is the reason for the season. And I find this yearly duel of the memes quite obnoxious, if I'm being honest, and obnoxious for both sides. But before you switch me off and bash me about the head, just give me an opportunity to explain a little bit. The reason why I find it obnoxious on both sides is because the tone of those memes for both Christians and pagans is exactly the same. It's, I'm right and you're wrong. And the implication of that is, not only will I impose my views on you, you will now comply with my preferences and change your life forthwith. So when you look at these things side by side, it's easy to say that this is the exact same attitude. It's just wearing different team jerseys. The memes aren't about celebrating anyone's religious beliefs or showcasing that someone believes, that their belief system, that they think it's beautiful and how it's meaningful for them. And it's not about, spiritual celebrations for anyone. It's just a flat out undisguised nag. And it's a shot across the bow towards one's opposition, and it's meant to bring people on who are on your own team, so to speak, in line, and at least pressure them to give lip service to the appropriate idea. I would argue that neither memes on either side actually reflects the spirit of Yule or the spirit of Christmas, and no amount of rationalizations that this is just about educating people. None of that rings true. Sorry. The tone of sharing facts in a manner intended to inform is quite different from the intention to put pressure on people to comply. And as an ex-Jehovah's Witness, the first 30 years of my life were defined by communication that had the expressed intention to persuade and then pressure to conform. So I have no difficulty recognizing the same behaviors even when they appear in different contexts. I'm very familiar with the difference between that and when facts are presented in a more dispassionate manner. So all this, it goes towards creating a more intolerant culture. And in recent years, we've just had this explosion of tribalism, and it's everywhere. It's not just confined to politics and religion, although that's where you will oftentimes hear the loudest voices. But this is destructive, and it sows the seeds of intolerance in a broader scale. And there are more and more examples of little mini ideological tribes, and they're notably consumed by groupthink. And they are seemingly formed only the teeniest, most insignificant, or the most absurd of details. So the result of all this has been the fracturing of society, and then there are microfractures within the major breaks. And the other consequences is that where before we had more of a live and let live mentality, and that being the order of the day, now we have an increasing number of people who have devalued or even rejected the idea of mutual tolerance, and they're just getting sick of the rantings and ravings of people who aren't on their team. The other consequence is that dissent from the groupthink, or those who are content to just kind of live and let live, they start to become considered apostates, heretics, infidels. Choose your word. It all means the same thing. It's saying you are not falling in line with our groupthink. You are not a team player for this. So I think it's worth pondering what kind of world we as individuals are helping create. Are we aiding the efforts of people who are striving to make it a more tribalistic and more intolerant world? Or are we aiding the efforts of those who would prefer to live in a free society in which people are essentially left alone? One of the very foundations of the United States is the idea that religion is not something to be imposed from the top down. It's a matter in which individuals make their own choices. Now, I think that free and open debate is important. And obviously, I don't think anyone should ever feel compelled to say that they believe or agree with something that they don't. I'm not opposed to theological discussion. I think there's great value to come from that. But I think we also must recognize the difference between an actual theological discussion and people who are just speaking to rally the troops and keep those troops in line. And this mutual intolerance, at the very least, it puts a damper on the holiday season, and it provides even further proof that social media, the activist culture, and going through life with a chip on your shoulder is a problem, and there are consequences, and those consequences aren't just to the individual who's already hurting themselves with this mentality, but it affects everyone around them, everyone who they might touch or come into contact with. And it's very sad that there are people who center their lives around spoiling other people's enjoyment and their established customs and choose that as a way of lashing out. I think it's distinctly unhealthy for everyone to have this need to be constantly on guard, knowing at any moment you could be confronted over what you believe by those who disagree, or be subjected to loyalty and purity tests from members of your own supposed tribe. So I would like to put forward my solution for a very small aspect of this ongoing controversy, which goes beyond, Christmas and Yule and all of that. And I would like to invite you to just consider this perspective to see if it has the potential to result in less stress for everyone. It's not going to bring about world peace, but could we have less stress? So, point one, for pagans, our reason for the season is indeed rooted in ancient customs and traditions centered around the winter solstice. Among other things, we are celebrating the return of longer days, and we're honoring the gods and goddesses who are associated with wintertime, with the potential for renewal, and also for those gods who are more liminal deities. They are in the in-between, and in many ways, winter is that in-between season. This is a deeply meaningful time for us. There are religious mysteries we can explore, and we can also contemplate how our own spirits will be renewed as we pass through one incarnation to the next. And a lot of this is centered on hope. Hope for the future, hope for ourselves, just hope for life in general. That's for pagans. Second bullet point. For Christians, Jesus is indeed the reason for their season. Now, while it is perfectly true, and I don't think it's wrong to point out or acknowledge that many of their traditions and customs were borrowed from paganism, however, even though a lot of those customs and traditions, even the imagery, was repurposed, we'll put it that way, it still remains on a spiritual level. What the Christians are focused on is Jesus and what his birth meant for their religion and for them personally, because his coming into the world, that does mean something very significant for Christians. It's tied up with their hope for eternal salvation. Not a small thing. Now, admittedly, it is pretty annoying with some Christians, and I want to stress some, not all, but some do behave as if time began with the appearance of Christianity. But despite that, little irritating trait, that still doesn't take away from the fact that for the Christians, Christmas means something very specific for them, and that is something that they do cherish. And as uncomfortable as it is for all of us involved, the reality is that the scrambling of pagan customs with Christian beliefs it occurred, and that process began more than a millennia ago. Christianity as we know it today is an amalgamation, and it's what people are accustomed to. And most people aren't really interested in analyzing the history of how everything came about. They just want to enjoy their holiday, and maybe we should just leave them to it. As long as they're not trying to prevent us from celebrating our holiday, that's the bargain of a free society. I let you do what you want, you let me do what we want, and we all shake hands and, and can get along and move forward. So finally, and the last thing is that we come to the final group of people, And these are the people who probably wish that we would all do less arguing and do more getting along. And these are people who celebrate Christmas and just see the season in general as more of a cultural event. They celebrate it because it is part of their heritage. Now, for those in that camp, the story of Santa Claus, who rewards good behavior with presents, the custom of getting together with family and friends and seeing, all the pretty lights and the decorations, all of those things are good enough reason to celebrate. And they're probably wondering why more people can't be content to just leave it at that and let people enjoy themselves in their own ways. And indeed, wouldn't it be simpler if we were all more concerned with making the season enjoyable for ourselves and for our families than it is to try and regulate the behavior and convictions of our neighbors? And that's what I think the back chat and the memes that get all snipey and go back and forth and other forms of commentary about this. I think this is what it's really about, a misplaced need for control over other people. Now, whether that desire is rooted in insecurity or desire of power for the sake of having power, or if it's just strictly tribalistic, it doesn't really matter. It creates an ugly atmosphere generally, and that's even more out of place during the holiday season. And one thing that all of the holidays during December have in common is a sense of exaltation. The exaltation of the best of the human spirit, as well as an acknowledgement of the kindness of the gods or the God that they believe in. And I think it would be uplifting if there was greater focus on that which uplifts people and uplifts the spirit. Now, it's not up to me to decide what anyone else is going to do, but for my part, I try not to add fuel to this particular fire. I think it's interesting to discuss the origins of customs and how things evolved, but I also think that can be done without bashing other religions or bitching about this or that and how what was stolen or repurposed centuries and centuries before any of us were born. Now, at Blackbird's Brew, we have had, and no doubt will continue to have, discussions about traditions and what they originally meant and what people's research has turned up. And it's quite enlightening. And the spiritual significance of what that does have relevance to us as we can decide each year, what we want to weave into our own Yule traditions. And if something that we've recently learned about, if it's really resonating with us and adding another layer to the texture of the holiday, especially if we feel that doing this will bring us closer to our gods. It's nice to have a place where we can talk about these things, and it really is about a sincere intention of learning more, of fully enjoying the practice of our faith, as well as the company of those who are like-minded. It creates a good atmosphere, and I think that reflects the spirit behind our reason for the season. So, now, what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this subject or on, related issues. You can comment here on the channel, or you could come visit us at Blackbird's Brew. There's a link to join in the description below. But in the meantime, please subscribe and like, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.